Hey, this is Al from Transformational Gaming. Appreciate you coming by. Appreciate you coming to the channel. Today I want to talk to you guys about the new information that's been given about the PS5 Pro. But before we get into all of that, I'd like to ask you to please subscribe to the channel. Please like the channel and comment. So that's my duty for the channel. Now let's get into the information. Now I'm going by what's written on this site called VG Chart, but there's other sites who have reported on this information, and all of those websites are reporting the same thing. And the thing that I want to talk about are two things. One, what is Sony trying to accomplish with this PS5 Pro, and what's Microsoft's going to do? What's Microsoft's response? We've already got a taste of what Microsoft's response is, but let's get into what Sony is aiming to do with the PS5 Pro. Now, I do want to echo the sentiment that I believe the PS5 Pro is coming. And a lot of that is because of the price cuts that are coming in North America specifically. They're supposed to be lowering the price of the PS5. Now, I don't know if they're going to do this in the form of slim, or they're just going to lower the price across the board. But there is rumor that price cuts are coming for the PS5. So I do want to solidify that my beliefs are that the PS5 Pro is coming, just based off the new consoles that they're trying to bring out and the price cuts that are coming. With that being said, I think there's actually three things that Sony is trying to do. And one is keep the frame rates viable for the consoles, ray tracing, and 4K. Now, I know they mentioned 8K in the article. I don't really want to talk about that, because to me, all they're doing, if they're trying to implement 8K for TVs, is basically leave a chance for the game to super sample, which I think the PS5 is able to do. I know it's a big thing about super sampling. Super sampling 4K looks marvelous, but I'm not going to get into that a whole lot. But let's start with the fact that my belief is that, contrary to what Digital Foundry is talking about, I do believe Sony has a conviction for frame rates to be at 60 and above. The reason why I believe that is because of the games that came out with over time for the PS5. I believe Spider-Man 2 is not going to be 30 frames, or not just going to be 30 frames per second. It's going to be a 60 mode on there somewhere. Unlike Microsoft, who keeps coming out with these 30 frame per second games. I do think that Sony, when they made the PS5, they made that console to run at 60 frames per second. And listen to me, I think having a game run at 60 frames per second is extremely important for a game, as far as its gameplay, as far as the look of the game. I mean, just take a look at the other Spider-Man that just came out on the PlayStation 5. I mean, they look great, but they also look great because of the 60 frames per second. It's something about the fluidity of the motion of characters when it runs at 60 frames per second. And it's not just that, it's the response time from the controls. You know, the gameplay is very, very important when you're doing a quick twitch game like Spider-Man, or name your game, Call of Duty. 60 frames per second is just more believable to my eyes than 30 frames per second. To me, 30 frames per second looks broken. It looks like it's unfinished. It looks like it's skipping somehow and something just isn't quite right. And you know, to me, for Digital Foundry to try to do a narrative that game lacking 60 frames per second is acceptable is just astronomically asinine. I mean, at one point, I believe John Linneman said something about, you know, you're stupid if you think that 60 frames per second only is viable. And I'm like, this sounds like something that Phil Spencer paid Digital Foundry to say. Because listen, we all know what's going on with Microsoft, but I don't think the things that goes on with Microsoft applies to Sony. I believe that every game that Sony can come out with can run 60 frames per second. Now, is that including ray tracing? No, but I was listening to Dreamcast guy, and one thing I believe he said correctly was right, and I don't think we need ray tracing. I think if we just get rid of ray tracing, games will be a lot better. But that's neither here nor there. And I'm playing Cyberpunk, and do I have a 4090? No, I have a 3090. But with my overclocking my PC and me overclocking my GPU, I don't know if this uses resizable bar, but I was able to go in and update my BIOS and my motherboard. Now I got the resizable bar. And listen, I don't know if any of that is helping or not, but I will say that I was able to get path tracing at 40 frames per second. And so, with that being said, I think that looking at Cyberpunk 2077 and looking at all of the graphics at maximum with all the ray tracing and stuff, I have to be honest with you, I was underwhelmed. I mean, maybe I'm not looking at it on the right monitor. I'm not sure exactly what's going on, but I mean, I didn't think that it was all of that. Compared to the regular ray tracing, the regular rasterization that I'm getting, path tracing is just not all of that. And so that'll lead me into the next portion, is the ray tracing. I do think that Sony can capitalize where AMD has failed. And AMD has failed definitely in the ray tracing department. For whatever reason, they cannot get hardware acceleration within their GPUs. And NVIDIA has been successful at it. And so, with these work group processors, I just don't think that doing software ray tracing is just a thing that is forward looking, But, with all that being said, they're going to do it. They're going to try and design the PS5 Pro to perform better under ray tracing. And, I think it's just all of it is just really a way to have the PS5 have more headroom. And so if the graphics are being implemented the same way as the PS5 Pro should be able to give you somewhat of a boost when it comes to having that headroom for games that are being ray traced. So the last thing is the 4K and the 8K. I don't think that 8K is ever going to be standardized, and I've said this before. Actually, I have a 8K video that I probably need to do an update to, but I just don't think 8K is amazing. 4K, you could kind of tell, but 8K really, it just looks, some of it has, it just has that more of the same look to it, and it's difficult to express, but me seeing it in store, I was really turned off by the 8K thing. And so I'm hoping that Sony is just, again, using that as more of a headroom type of situation so that the PlayStation can perform better at 8K using ray tracing and performing at a high frame rate, maybe 120, 60 at the lowest. And so I'm thinking that all of that is important to Sony, and that's good because it does kind of separate them from the competition who keeps releasing games at 30 frames per second. And I'm thinking that they're saying, hey, look, that's fine. If you want all these companies, that's fine, but we're going to compete harder and have our games run at a higher frame rate and basically have them look better. And so that takes me into Microsoft, and Phil Spencer has already said, it seems like everything he says is like catastrophic. This game's going to come out at 30 frames per second. Oh, we're not doing a pro style console. I can't believe he came out and said, hey, we're not doing a pro style console. Like, what is up with this dude, man? And I kind of know why that they're giving up the ghost. But they also could be lying. I'm going to leave room for that too. But if they really decided not to come out with a pro style console, it's because of our lovely friend that we all know and love, DirectX. You know, they're probably looking at the situation and said, man, we're having trouble getting the maximum performance out of the Xbox Series X. Because at one point in time, I believe he said that the Xbox Series S is their next generation console, and they've already come out with the Series X as a Pro style console. So they're not doing anything else, which kind of makes sense. But man, if that's true, they're not trying to do a Pro style console. To me, it's going to be because of DirectX. That they're not able to get what they need out of the drivers, and that's a problem. And that they are not really ready to do a Pro style console because they're not able to get all of the hardware. Maybe the Xbox Series X can do more, and we just don't know about it because they're telling developers to develop for this Xbox Series S and have the X as their headroom console. I don't know, but I do know that the PlayStation 4 Pro, developers actually developed for that console. That's why that console was really good, especially on the first party. I mean, developers were aiming and targeting that console, and I don't think we had that for the Xbox One X. And that, to me, is a recipe for failure. That's just a recipe for failure, man. And that's why you see Xbox in the situation they're in. They're trying to buy a bunch of companies so they can lower the quality. Why? They're bringing games and companies over to Microsoft only to have them develop and target the Series S, which is bad, folks. That's bad. That's really, really, really bad. That's really, really, really bad. So, and I do think that if they're not going to release a Pro console, it's probably because of DirectX. That they still haven't tapped into what the Series X can do, and so they're just kind of just developing for the Series S and making things maybe 4K, maybe having it run a little bit faster at 60 frames per second, but they're not trying to have every game run at 60 frames per second. Unlike Sony, who wants everything to run at 60 frames and above. So, I don't know. I'm not going to keep harping on some of the failures of Microsoft and what Sony's trying to do. I do want to hit on one last thing, though. And the last thing I want to hit on is what is going to be the price of the PS5 Pro. Now, last time I admitted I was wrong. They came out with the console being at $399 basically with the disc-less version. And so now they're coming out with the Pro console. And with the prices being lowered on the PS5, I'm not sure what the Pro console is going to be. Could it be $600? Could it be $700? Could it be $800? Listen, the AMD chips are extremely inexpensive. That's what AMD is known for. That's why Sony is sticking with AMD. And Sony is probably going to modify the chips that AMD are coming out with, because they are a chip maker themselves. I mean, Sony has made many chips within their own products and in other people's products. So Sony has a deep history of building chips. And so they're probably going to have, off-the-shelf chips and probably just modify them for the PlayStation, take all the stuff that they don't need and put in stuff that they like, which is more specifically the ray tracing and the 4K. Now, I want to say one more thing about the 4K stuff. The 4K is probably going to be checkerboarded in some type of way. So I won't count on it being basically brute force at native 4K. It's probably going to be checkerboarded, but they're probably going to put hardware accelerants in there to do the checkerboard and the other stuff that makes the image look like a 4K image using lower resolutions. So it'll be great, because honestly, I can't tell. I mean, it's gotten so good now. I can't tell the difference between native and not. I'm playing Cyberpunk again, and Cyberpunk, I ain't gonna lie to you, the resolution looks pretty good, and I know I'm using DLSS, but it looks pretty good. So I wouldn't be surprised if Sony is probably doing something for their hardware to do better version of checkerboard rendering. I don't think they're gonna do FSR. You can do FSR on AMD products, but they're not going to specify FSR. I think they're going to do some type of stuff on their own that's like checkerboard rendering. So, but as far as the price is concerned, yeah, AMD got cheap chips. I wouldn't be surprised if the PS5 Pro was $500. Now, I've been wrong before, but I wouldn't be surprised if they just lowered the other SKUs, maybe $299 and $399 for the PS4 disc version and discless version, and then made it $499 for the PS5 Pro. That makes a lot of sense. But I think, again, it's going to be more so what the Series X is, which is a headroom unit, and the games are already probably going to be overstepping their boundaries, because you can see a lot of these games are overstepping their boundaries, especially on the PS5. They're just tanking in resolution and looking bad. You look at something like Jedi Survivor, and you know, the headroom would do wonders for a PS5 Pro. So anyway, tell me what you think. This video's going on and on and on and on. I've seen a lot of people make videos about the PS5, but to me, they are kind of inadequate. So hopefully this puts some meat on the bones, some perspective. Let me know if you have any questions. This is Al from Transformational Gaming, and we are out.